Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the new Lamb Family College of Business Dean, Dr. Eugene Sivadas, who joined us in the last couple of months. Prior to joining the Lamb Family College of Business, Eugene spent 15 years on the faculty of the Milgard School of Business at the University of Washington, Tacoma, where he had held appointments as Associate Dean of Academic and Student Affairs, Director of the MBA program, Coordinator of the Master's Program in Cybersecurity and Leadership, and Professor of Marketing. He holds a Ph.D. in Marketing from the University of Cincinnati and has held faculty appointments at Rutgers Business School, the University of Cincinnati, and Emerson College. Welcome, Eugene. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Manny, and thank you, Janine, for organizing this event. I'm very happy to welcome all of you, along with my colleagues, many of whom are here today. And it's also really exciting when the event focuses on our alumni, because end of the day, you know, what's better for us to spend than to spend an evening with two very successful alumni, both of whom are graduates of our MBA program. And of course, the topic also is very dear to our collective hearts, innovation and leadership. It's a topic that's very important to the Lamb Family College of Business. So let me, so I'm really thrilled to hear from Stephen Gillett, who's going to talk about his career and lessons from his recently published book, From Simi Valley to Silicon Valley. So let me give you a brief bio of each of our guest speakers. Stephen Gillett is the former CEO and co-founder of Chronicle. And his most recent book is From Simi Valley to Silicon Valley, a story of hard work, serendipity, and questing. He co-founded Chronicle and also served as an executive in residence at Google Ventures. And his leadership experience spans across enterprise software, retail, and consumer technology. And prior to joining Google, Stephen was COO of Symantec and on its board of directors. And he also held executive positions at Best Buy and at Starbucks, where he was Chief Information Officer and GM of Digital Ventures. Stephen Gillett holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Oregon and an MBA from SF State. And Clarice Turner is a globally recognized senior management executive and president of Joseph Phelps Vineyards, where she's responsible for the strategy, structure, and culture for sustained profitability and future growth, while nurturing the next generation of this iconic winery and its family owners. Prior to joining Phelps, Turner was the CEO of Carneros Associates, which is a strategic advisory firm she founded to guide businesses in transition. Her pedigree as a senior management executive of best-in-class companies in the food and beverage industry included Starbucks, Boudin Bakeries, Yum Brands, and PepsiCo. And Clarice earned an MBA with a concentration in international business and a bachelor's in geology from SF State. So Clarice, I have a few questions for you before I pass over the mic to you to begin the Q&A with Stephen. I recently learned that you and Stephen worked together as executives for Starbucks. What are the chances you would find another executive leader who's a graduate from SF State? Go Gators. Did you know that he was an SF State grad?
Not initially. When I met him, he and I were on a long flight one day and we were talking. He was telling me all about how he was a personal 3G spot, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And we got laughing and talking in our backgrounds, and he mentioned that he went to SF State, and that's how we figured out that we had that in common.
Wow. Did you meet a lot of people from SF State at Starbucks, or was that a very unusual thing?
I met a few. Yeah, many of them, as you know, are from Washington, right? Because people don't. Yes. People that go to school, I was on the board of Washington State for many years, and people that go to school in Washington tend to stick around. So they gravitated towards Starbucks, many of them. But yeah, there were a few.
Sure. So could you share us your philosophy on innovation and leadership, the topic of the day for today?
Yes, absolutely. Personally, I'm an extremely innovative person, almost to a fault. It's second nature to me to find a better way to do something. So I am constantly reinventing and honing for effectiveness. It's driven me for many, many years. And, I have a personal mission to make a difference in whatever it is that I do. It translates to many areas of life and work from a leadership standpoint, but it manifests itself in all sorts of areas. Leading a team, leading a company, facilitating, collaborating, supporting to be the very best that you can be often involves the need to innovate. How that shows up in me personally is that I strive to bring out the best in people. It's been something that I care deeply about my entire career, and every day I strive to be a catalyst for success, to create a positive and caring dynamic and very powerful culture. And through many lessons over the years, working with many amazing and also, unfortunately, many awful leaders and cultures, both, right? You learn, and you learn what you can choose to control as a leader. And innovation has been a big part of it, because you can create a better place no matter what, and life is too short not to. I would say from a leadership standpoint, that has been absolutely key, not only to who I am, but the fit for me of different cultures and opportunities that I've come across in my career.
Sure, this is a theme we'd like to hear more about later today. But how has SF State, and in particular our MBA program, shaped your career journey?
Well, it's interesting. I put myself through 10 years of college, undergrad and grad, and I always worked 3 or 4 jobs in the hospitality industry. And what I loved about SF State was the flexibility that it offered me based on the location and the breadth of programs that were available, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do longer term. And also the credibility, right? The science and the geology department are very well known, very well respected, and the MBA program's accredited. I worked on campus. I utilized the Career Center. I had many mentors. I had internships. I took advantage of all of those things. So it was just a very, very solid foundational place for me to start. I pursued my passion for science. Unfortunately, calculus and statistics held me back because I'm not so great at that, but I really did love it. I did a grad exchange program in Fudan University in China, and that led me to business. Actually, it was really interesting. I loved learning about other cultures and learned the language. And then when I came back, I was there and using those skills and discovering new paths. It's a journey. Life evolves, and so do we. So it was just a really great, flexible place. And I love San Francisco. I love the Bay Area. The networks that the university is connected to landed me my first job, actually, with PepsiCo way back in the day.
Awesome. Thank you. So thank you for sharing your experience. So now, Clarice, I pass the mic over to you, and I leave for you and Stephen to enlighten us. Thank you.
All right. Stephen, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So Stephen and I had a great time working together at Starbucks. He has a wonderful personality and sense of humor. And with respect to tech, I didn't always know what the heck he was talking about, but the more he would explain things, the more afraid I got of what he was saying most of the time. But he was a powerhouse as an executive at Starbucks, and really took Starbucks to where it is today, actually, from a tech standpoint, and enabled so many things that we didn't even know we needed, Stephen, when you came on. So it was lovely to work side by side. So let's start off a little bit about, similar to a question that I just answered, is tell us about your journey from Simi Valley to SF State.
Yeah, so my wife, actually, her family has 150 years in San Francisco history, going back to when her great grandma was a daughter, or great grandma was a little girl. She used to pay in gold her rent in the city, and used to take a little ferry across the bay before the Golden Gate Bridge. And so when I met my wife, we're high school sweethearts. So when I was 17, I got to meet her before she passed away, and she would tell us all these great stories. So we have, so for the journey, I was born in LA, moved to Eugene, Oregon when I was 10. and of course met my wife in high school, and we've been together ever since. So at 44 years old, that's 27 years we've been together. So you can do the math. And our plan was, after we graduated in '98, we came back to San Francisco and spent most of our 20s there again. So it was like this magnet that kept pulling us back. And I kind of worked my way up through the tech industry in the Bay Area. And back to your question and Eugene's original question to you, like my MBA and going to SF State actually came from quite a sense of insecurity and uncertainty, because I was moving up through the tech ranks in San Francisco companies. And as soon as I hit about the vice president level, I realized that most of what I was dealing with was not related to technology. And we have to start, making sure we hit financial performance, and making sure we have a workforce plan, and making sure we mentor people on career development and how to move into new markets. And as I started to encounter less and less technology questions, which I felt very, very confident with, and more business or operational questions, it was that insecurity that led me to eventually enroll in SF State's MBA program, and couldn't have made a better decision. In fact, that's the one decision in life my wife gives me full credit for doing. That's
great. I think your wife's relatives and mine must have known each other. Mine came here in 1771 to San Francisco.
Wow.
We probably have some mutual stories back in the days.
Yeah.
We weren't that familiar then. So you wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about your book, which the title is From Simi Valley to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so I wrote it. So I don't know if it was in the bio part, but my wife and I have 8 kids. So imagine, and we live in just near Palo Alto right now. I'm actually still at work. That's this location in South San Francisco. But we have 8 kids, and so I was going through my, with this, people look at us and say, "Wow, you have a young kid," or you're young parents because you have this 18-year-old who's going to college. And then I say, yeah, but then you look over and there's the 15-month-old in the stroller. And I say, when that little dude is you're going to college, I'll be 60 years old, right? So we had this wonderful life where we've been together so long. We had 8 kids, 4 boys, 4 girls, this wonderful career. I have, I'm a pretty, I don't want to humble brag here, but I'm a pretty famous gamer. And I was a Division I athlete, so I played football for the Oregon Ducks as well. So I was like the captain of the football team, but also named the #1 guild master in World of Warcraft. And you'll never find that in one person again. And so I have all this life experiences. So I said, one gift for my kids is, let me write the first 40 years of our life as a present to these kids so they have it forever. And so I spent a couple years, the last couple years writing it, and got to the point where I'm working with the editor and the publisher, and they're helping me think through. And I said, I just want 50 copies, because figure my kids and the extended family, that was all I wanted. I wasn't trying to make money or anything or tell the world my story. And the publisher actually convinced me and said, there's a ton of interesting life lessons and family lessons and career lessons in here that could be much more beneficial to just your family. Would you mind if we made it available to the world? And I said, well, I never really wrote it with that in mind, so I was a little nervous. They convinced me to do it. And so last year we made it available, and it's just been, I hit #1 in Amazon quite quickly, stayed there for a couple months. And to this day, I still get notes from people all over the world that say, this part of your story and that part of your story was relevant. But it's a life journey. It's about, the wonderful successes and some of the spectacular failures all mixed into one book, and written as a gift to the family, but now as a gift to anyone who decides to read it.
Wonderful. What a great way for that to evolve.
Yeah, it's been fun. It was interesting because my dad's an immigrant to the U.S. from Lebanon, the Middle East, and we grew up in a house where English was his 3rd language, so after Arabic and French. And then the full life cycle now for him to read that book, because it starts off with his part of the journey coming to the U.S. and then leads into all this wonderful story after, ups and downs of it all. And for him to read it was like, wow, that was quite a circle for him to connect all that and see what that move to the U.S. in the late 1960s ended up doing.
It's humbling today when we think about ourselves, isn't it, in terms of what they went through to give us the lives that we have today.
Yeah, it's it's definitely a sense of gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, I will be forever indebted to you from a parental standpoint. I visited Stephen one time when he was at Google, and it was almost Christmas time, and I had no idea what to get for my 16-year-old son, who's also a gamer. And Stephen said, "Get him a loot box." Right. And that, I tell you, the most popular year for me. He's like, "Mom, how in the world?" I'm like, my little secret. I got a friend.
Yeah, thanks for the loot box. I hope you got him 10, not 1. That's kind of weak.
Whatever it was, I did well.
Yeah.
He was but I'm forever grateful for that advice. So going back to State, how did SF State help you in your career path? What was your experience?
Yeah, it was good. So I enrolled, I got involved with the program. I was a vice president at CNET at the time, which is downtown SF. And so I was doing nights and weekends and kind of mixing it in wherever I could. And they were very accommodating for our cohort. And, it was interesting because I get asked a lot by undergrads, do you recommend people get their MBA? And they send me articles like, "Our MBA is worth it, MBA is not worth it." And I said, it's almost an individual thing. For me, and I think our cohort, this is kind of interesting, our cohort was half people that came right out of undergrad. So they were probably 21 or 22 years old. And the next thing they wanted to do is get their MBA. And the other half of us were in our late 20s, some in their early 30s, who had, 8 or 9 years of experience. And like me, as I was learning things in the MBA program, I was actually applying it sometimes that same week at work. And so our retention value of the knowledge and the teaching was quite high. And when you fast forward, 5, we've all stayed in touch. And some of the ones who came right out of undergrad, they actually don't remember as much, or they have a different, perspective on it because they never applied it until many years later. Whereas those of us that had the necessity of the world driving us to get our MBA, it became a part of our toolkit in almost every fashion because we were applying it so quickly. And that gave me a confidence, the application part, and be able to now sit with our CFO and talk about finances and look at the balance sheet and have a point of view on whether we should acquire this company or expand internationally. And all these decisions I was asked before I got my MBA was, push that insecurity that I had. But after, it gave me more of a confidence to start engaging. I was always a student and still am, but it gave me a confidence to go have the table stakes conversation.
Yeah, that's terrific. I was much younger in my career and coming from science, right? So I didn't know anything about balance sheets. So I learned from people like you. Thank you, Stephen. But I always pulled my weight on team projects, though. I was always the one who was doing the midnight oil and not skating.
You're always good.
Those team projects were the bane of my existence. But it's wonderful that you were able to apply it, immediately, right? What a great value, not only to you, but to the company that you were working with at the time.
Yeah, no, it was very, very valuable.
Terrific. Well, how about leadership? Let's talk about leadership for a minute. What do you think are the most important attributes of leaders today?
This has changed over the years. I used to be, like a network administrator back in the old days, or a sysadmin, they call them. And I always used to look up the org chart and say, if I'm ever going to be the CTO one day, I won't do this or I'll do that. And I had all these ideas, and I never figured, I would get there. I always thought, I'll just be a mid-level tech person, which is fine. You make good money, you have a good work-life balance, you do fun work. So I wasn't ever, striving to get to the top. And in the end, when I finally got there, Starbucks was my first Fortune 500 C-level job, and then they've all continued since then. But I realized, and I think you've done the same. I learned a lot from our boss, Howard Schultz, who, he took a bet on me. I was 32 years old. He brought me in. I had no retail and no experience in coffee or any of that. And he had the instinct, which I thought was quite powerful, which is if you look at the customers of the company and the future of how the brand should interface with those customers, it looks very techie in nature. It's a very technical thing. iPhones were just released. And as he was coming back as CEO, he made the kind of prescient move to say, I want to hire someone who's more of a Silicon Valley tech person to run our IT and engineering efforts, not a traditional retailer. And so when I joined the company, and I was in my early 30s at that point. I spent, the next 5 years working for him, and he kind of brought up my natural instincts that leadership wasn't about a positional authority or driving top-down decisions, but I remember he said to me, the guy who sweeps the floor should pick the broom. Like, don't be the kind of manager who is overbearing on the people that work with you. And he said and taught me to really like be a good person, like even when nobody's looking, be a good person, not just when you're on stage or at an investor meeting or at an all hands, and make sure that you hold people accountable, but you do it with a sense of humanity and a sense of grace. And I think leadership embodies those. A lot of people I've run into over the years feel like, hey, I made it to be a C-level exec at some big company, and therefore I have all the authority to go do things. And I think it's almost reverse, which is you get more responsibility to advocate for your team, to remove obstacles for them, to compensate them well and give them meaningful work, and be a shoulder for them to talk to about their career and their personal life if needed. And those are the kinds of things that I ascribe to successful leaders.
Very cool. The human element, as he used to call it, right?
Yeah.
Always teaching us to use our scale for good as well.
Yeah, exactly. And always combine companies' profitability and financial performance with what he called the social conscience, and make sure that you never solve for just being a profitable high stock price.
Yeah. He did not suffer fools if you couldn't get that. It was a dynamic environment, a very fun and such.
Oh yeah.
That's great. So how about lessons? What are some lessons that you can impart on the people on the call in terms of things that have struck you in your life and career?
Yeah, well, the nice thing is I wrote a book about those lessons, but I think many of you have it. And but for the most part, people look at professionally successful people, because sometimes the personal life comes, you get very professionally successful, but then you leave like a trail of destruction in your personal life. And so I think the lessons for me is, if you're on the call now, and I don't have the exact profiles of everyone, we have a general sense of who's here, but if you're a student, undergrad or grad or postgrad, try to go and work on areas where you get exposed to a whole set of styles and decisions and experiences. Don't try to think, okay, how do I go from this level to this level to this level? Just early in your career, if I can go back and give myself advice, it would be just go broad and take the time to get exposed to different leadership styles, different experiences, different kinds of businesses, and make sure you deliberately, by design, go wide and go far. Don't just go narrow, is my first set of advice. The second is, the one time in my career during the .com years, I took a new job in San Francisco for the money. They offered me like, a 20% raise or something. It was the year 2000. And I went home to my wife and I said, oh, they're giving me another 10 grand or whatever it was. And I left the great job I had to go to get a few $1,000s a year more. And the only time the wheels fell off of a decision was when I went after the money. So make sure if you're going to move jobs, or you're going to make sure you look at it holistically. What kind of person are you going to work for? What's the viability of the business? Are you going to get a set of new experiences? Do you like the market that the company is operating in? Like, make sure you look at that holistically. I'd give my 25-year-old version of me some advice to make sure he did that. So, and then my dad gave me this advice. It was translated from some Arabic proverb that said, be nice to all the people you meet on the way up, because you meet them all on the way back down. And I think that was probably my general piece of wisdom, which is, be humble and don't leave a trail of people who just don't like working with you or being around you and working for you in the case you get to leadership. And if you package all that up, you'd get a general sense of my leadership advice.
Much happier journey, what you just described. Yeah, more fulfilling. So, Stephen, who do you look up to for inspiration and mentorship?
My career is a series of the serendipity part of my book, the questing and serendipity part, is at any given point from when I was in college decided to stop playing football because I thought that was a dead end, path in life. And I couldn't even name one player on the Ducks, nor do I even watch sports. It's been 20 plus years. But for me, it was at some moments in my life, I got opportunities that I never would have qualified for on paper or from experience. And that means someone took a bet on me. And for the most part, most of those times, if not all, that bet paid off and ended up good. A couple times it wobbled a bit, but for the most part, they were successful. And I think that is, for example, Dr. John C. Brown, who's now in his probably late 70s. You'll read about him a lot in the book. He ran Xerox PARC. He was on the board of Amazon for many years. He is the first one to identify my gaming. He came over. The story in the book is he came over one day. I was like his IT support guy, all the way up until I became president at Best Buy, and finally told him, "Hey, dude, you can't keep calling me if you can't print. I'm like running this $50 billion company." But so after 12 years, I finally got him an IT person. But all those 12 years, he took a bet on me early. He came into my house in San Francisco. It's funny in the story you'll read, we were on an extreme makeover show where they took our San Francisco, our little crappy row house, and they turned in this beautiful Italian villa, but you have to read the book to get the full story. It was on HGTV. Anyway, he came over to have me transfer the data from his old IBM laptop to his new one, and I was in the middle of like a World of Warcraft endgame raid. And because he's trained as a social scientist, I said, "Hey, can you hold on a sec while I finish this?" And he came and sat next to me and was watching this raid and watching us give directions and watching us talk about stats and movements. And, for those that know, they can get quite complicated. But the social scientist part of him was analyzing this and wondering what it was. And he ended up putting his laptop aside. And for the rest of the night, we talked about what I was doing there. And he eventually documented it and wrote some articles and started to get, become a voice or a thought leader in how gaming impacts leadership. And I became unexpectedly an early poster child for that. So John C. Brown is one. Howard Schultz is one, as we talked about, took a bet on a young man who didn't have the experience, but had the right mindset to be a part of that team. And that was another one. So for me, mentorship was someone who gave me advice, observed something I was doing, and either translated that into opportunity or took a bet on me that otherwise I wouldn't have been, naturally qualified to take.
Very cool. I think it's interesting when you talk about people taking a bet on you. You also had the courage to step up, right? And to try for something that maybe, I see so many, my daughter's 23, and I see so many people who think they have to be, 99.9% qualified for every single thing listed on a job spec.
No, stop.
Try 70, maybe.
I try to hire people and I give advice. I say, I'll talk to people, ask them, what's your, I'll try to find something unique about them. I don't really care about your GPA, no offense. I don't really care how many acronyms are after your name. Like, I want to get in touch with like who you are and how do you make decisions? How do you work on teams? And so one of the things I do, I was just interviewing some, senior exec today, and I asked them, what was your first job? And they're like, "Oh, I worked at, Pfizer." And I, no, before that, they get nervous, right? They're like, "Oh, before that, I was in college." Yeah. What was your job there? Well, one guy was like, very nervously, he's got all the best credentials, makes a ton of money, works at a Fortune 500 tech company. And he's like, "I was a sous chef for the local sushi place on campus." I'm like, "Great. Tell me about that." And after you get past the nervous part, this 50-some-odd-year-old exec just opened up about his favorite rolls and how he did the roll and the rice and what he mixed the wasabi with. And we spent 20 minutes talking about sushi. And in that, he almost got a permission to really talk about what makes him tick and what gets him excited. Another guy I talked to said, this was a few years ago, I said, "What do you do on the weekends? Like, what are you doing this weekend for fun? Tell me." He's like, "Well, parents, I don't know, for fun." He said, "Well, I'm working on a treadmill that he's a mechanical engineer. I want to tinker it out so I can run backwards on it." I was like, "Well, why would you want to run backwards on a treadmill?" And here we go, another 20 minutes on, this treadmill. This lady loves organic gardening. She's telling me all about the nitrate mix in her organic garden. So you kind of sweep away the credentials and the GPA and the internships. All those are important, but I think modern leadership gets to the who you are and unpacks that, and that informs how you would operate on the team, how you would make decisions, how you'd represent the company. And for me, that is as important, if not more, than all the other, things that I talked about.
Absolutely, because we wind up spending a lot of hours of our lives with these people, don't we? It's great
Absolutely, yeah.
spend time around people you want to. Great. Well, in closing part of the session, what advice, and you've given much already, Stephen, but if you had to pick, one piece of advice to give the folks who are on this call this evening, what would it be?
It depends on where you are in your life. Again, if you're already at work or a professional and you want to move to the next level, that would be maybe a little bit different set of advice to someone who's just graduating. But the thread that, at least in my story, and I'm not saying it's for everyone, is goes back to what I said earlier, which is, being a perpetual student of business, student of styles, so leadership styles or operating styles or team styles. Be compassionate. Realize that I think one of the most interesting concepts that I've practiced and been successful with is, understand the person you are in your different environments. So right now, I lead quite large teams, and I try to understand the whole person, meaning personally, when I have a great boss or a great work or a great project that I worked on, or I get a nice bonus, whatever it is I have at work, if that's going well, when I go home, I'm a better dad, a better volunteer, a better husband, a better community member, just a better son, whatever it is. So, and if I have a very bad day at work, like I become less in those areas. And vice versa. If I have a great day at work and my kid was at some dance event and she did great, or he did great because my son's danced too, I go to work and I'm supercharged. Everyone likes working with me. So as a leader, I try to care about both precincts. I'm not going to be too nosy on the home stuff or connected, but I want to make sure we're creating a set of conditions where when you go home, you're actually showing up better in all those areas and vice versa. And so my advice to you is, whether you're new at work or you've been doing it for 20 years, try to understand the people you work with are people, and they're people outside of the work environment as well. And if you take the time to care about that and know about that and show sincere interest in that, you get better and they get better in your interactions, whether they're outside or at work.
Terrific advice. Boy, do I wish my 25-year-old self could have heard that back in the day. It would have made a lot of difference. But we find our paths, don't we? Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. It's lovely to see you, to talk to you, and certainly a great pleasure to learn more about your career journey. I'll turn it over now to Janine to open up for questions, please.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Clarice. I have a couple of questions in the chat already, so we'll go ahead and get started. If you do have a question, please indicate so in the chat or through the raised hand function. I'll also be inviting those of you who are asking to ask the question yourself if you'd like. So our first question is going to come from Jeremy McCabe. He can't be on video right now, but Jeremy, you're there. Okay, go ahead.
Hello. Hi, yeah, thanks, Stephen, for the meeting tonight. Great information. As I looked through the bio, two things popped out. First, you said, stay focused. The other one is be present, both of which I think are important. But in this world, this very busy world with loads of distractions, I'm always trying to find a strategy for prioritizing and also for really making sure that those distractions are contained. Do you have any tricks or strategies that you deploy to keep those things under control and make your decisions?
Yeah, it's and I think this world right now, the last 8 months is kind of new territory for everyone. So anyone who gets on a call and says they figured that all out is probably not, honest with themselves first, let alone the audience. For me, it's, like you said, it's be present, which means people ask me, and there's a question, all this, like the balancing. How do you find the work-life balance? And I said, I don't have a good balance. And it doesn't mean I work excessively. What it means is, even if it's 70-30% of my day work home, I'm there when I'm at home. Like I turn off the phone, I go with the kids. I try to tell them, the younger ones, I tell them a bedtime story at night. I try to help with the bath. I take the dogs out. I do what I need to do. So for the time I am at home, or with the family, I am there 100%. I'm not doing, I'm not doing this. And hey guys, tell me about your school. And that's what I mean by be present and be there. And when I'm at work, I'm the same way. But the nice thing is, before COVID, I would actually bring the kids with me and try to find opportunities to share them the work side of it, and bring them in and share them some of the things I do at work. And that exposes them to work life, but it also allows me to get more time with them. So I'm not saying I have the magic formula for a 50-50 setup, but whether you're at home or whether you're at work, just be in the now. Don't be distracted. And you'll read a bunch of stories in the book about what really shocked me to start thinking like that. And if we had a few hours, I can go through each one, but I try to capture those again as lessons for the young kids, but more importantly, to be there now in the present, whether you're at home or work.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate the response.
Thank you, Jeremy. Our next question comes from Angie Healy. Angie, would you like to jump on video and ask your question?
Definitely, yeah. I was just wondering, thank you so much for being here, first of all, but I was just wondering, what are some of the most effective tools that you've found for leading a team or being a leader in general?
I think it depends on if it's your first time doing it or if you've been doing it for 10 years. So assume you're earlier in career and you want to go lead a team. I think the number one thing, and actually this doesn't change a lot, even if you, is be humble enough to ask for help. So when I went from being an individual contributor, like doing everything myself, to managing a team, it's a very hard transition, because you go from a world where you have to have all the answers. Should we open the data center? Should we do this? Should we buy this tech? Should we move from HP to Dell? Like answer. When you become a leader of people, you have to get out of the answer question. You have to get out of the answer mindset, and you have to get into the ask the right question mindset. So instead of being the one that says, hey, I know the answer to all these, you have to start asking the right questions, which means sometimes you need to ask for help. Should we do this? What is your best thinking, of this expansion? Give me your analysis on why we should acquire this company. And yeah, you're in the question business. So I would say, as you move from being an individual contributor to leading small and then, of course, very large teams, get really good at asking questions, even if some of those questions are asking for help from the smarter people around you.
And I might take that in a more tactical direction, Angie, just in terms of leading teams. In terms of tools, there's a tool called DISC that's all about behavior styles, and it really celebrates the differences in people, particularly around communication and decision making. And that, to create a team, you want diversity in your team in all senses of that word. And it really helps you to enable people to understand how to meet people in the middle, because, it's human nature, unfortunately, to want people to be like us. And that is not how you get greatness in a team or in a company. That's one. And then the second one, I would say, there's a book called the Oz Principle. And within that, there is a concept called the accountability model. I've used that in every single job I've had. And when my franchisees adopted it at PepsiCo, I knew I was onto something, because they never would do anything I asked them to do voluntarily, and they love that tool. So those would be two kind of practical things that I would add to what Stephen said.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Our next question comes from Joseph Thompson. Joseph, do you want to turn your video on and ask your question? You're on mute, Joseph. I'll go ahead and ask his question. What would you tell someone who has been trying to work in the office side of hospitality or other industries when most of your experiences are in frontline experience?
You want to take that one, Clarice, and I'll add after?
Sure. Yeah, there's always a way to pivot. And, the skill sets that are in the office side of things are very similar to what they are in frontline. It's all about interaction with people. Oftentimes that just takes the right opportunity to show up. But showcasing your skills that are transferable to office would be something that I'd focus on there, and then trying to find, the right opportunity. It may not even be at the level that you're looking for, but sometimes when you get your foot in the door and people love you, other opportunities have a way of emerging very fast. So it takes a risk, but there's a lot of transferable skills there, namely the people skills.
Yeah, I mean, I would add too. I think that's all great, and I've seen people do that at Starbucks. Some of the best office or back office people came from the front line, the stores. Yeah. I would say, if you're working at a company, Joseph, most companies have programs to identify top talent or interested talent in their frontline operations, whether it's a hotel and you're working, in the concierge, or it's a retail and you're working in a store or restaurant. So I would, reach out to your HR team if you're at a company and ask, is there any career development resources or advancement that we should know about? Because a lot of times the big companies, or even they put a lot of work into this, but they're not effective in communicating that out to the frontline employees. And so get really curious and find out, and poke around and figure out if there's any central group in HR or operations that is, trying to get people like you identified so they can, help develop. And if you're good, if you suck, you're in trouble. But if you're good, they'll really want to bring you up. I was on the board of directors for Chipotle, and one of the most interesting things you'll find in my wallet as a result of that is a free for life Chipotle card. And Chipotle did a great job, just like Starbucks. Yes, that was for life for those really scratching their head. But Chipotle did a great job, like identifying people running great restaurants and promoting them to run other restaurants and teaching others how to run great restaurants. And some of the highest paid and most successful retail people at the company started off, brown or white and pinto or black and what kind of protein, and worked their way up to make a pretty good living and a really fulfilling and rewarding life, that teaching other people how to run effective restaurants. So get curious and don't wait for it to happen to you. Kind of go make it happen.
Great. Our next question comes from Lutfis Saeed. Lutfis, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and show yourself on video?
Can you see? Okay.
Good to see you again.
Stephen, I don't know if you remember me, but many years ago, a great memory. We talked about data centers and sustainability and green IT and all of that. And I'd love to talk to you about data centers for, ad infinitum, but for the sake of the rest of the audience, I'll, give that up. But I also invited you to give a talk sometimes in our the same class that you took, and hopefully you'd be able to do this virtually sometime down the road, though I don't teach that class right now. But I think last time I asked you, you had 6 kids at the time.
Yeah, we have this annual baby thing that is hard to schedule around. We're done with that now.
I think you're waiting for the 6th or about to have the 7th. I can't remember. But anyway, this question is actually for both of you. Now that both of you have gone through the MBA program, we have added another new master's program called Masters in Business Analytics, I think since both of you completed. And now that you look back at it, how would you, what would you add to it? How would you structure it, the curriculum-wise, the curriculum portion of it? That's a feedback we need from our alumni, especially our successful alumni. What were the factors that you were able to leverage? You kind of talked about it. And what were the parts that you would suggest that we try to improve? Thank you.
Do you want to start, Clarice?
Sure. I think where I struggled the most when I all of a sudden had a very big job with PepsiCo, 67 direct reports in my first year and a half, not ideal. I used every tool that I was taught, my MBA program, and then some in terms of what I learned, being in and lower level management in hospitality. But the things that were missing for me were the people skills, because I learned a lot of theoretical HR, but the things I was just talking about, DISC and just, behavior styles and how you get the best out of a team, how you build a great team, kind of transitioning from the theoretical to the practical, with a human element to it, and that it just takes time usually to develop that as a leader. I think anything that you can do to enhance that, and also the time management piece of prioritization and coaching people how to manage their time, and doing that, whether it's, some of the project management classes really helped with that, but the practicality, again, in terms of systems that you can use and just how to bring that through all the way through an organization, not just personally. And you may have all that, I don't know, but you didn't back in the day, so.
Yeah, I was there in the 2000s, so 2003 to 2006 in that range. And I think for me, it would be, now that I know the cohort and we're all friends now 15 years later, but I would try to cluster the cohort or design these cohorts depending on where they are and what's driving them to be in the program. Remember I said we got lumped in with a bunch of, really smart, energetic, just out of undergrad. And so we ended up clustering the people in the workforce and had, many years of experience together, and they kind of clustered in more of the academic sense. And so I would design it, maybe you have a, professionals cohort, which is people that have 5 or more years of experience, and people that are coming out of undergrad, because you can tailor the content to the life cycle of that person's career or academic life a little bit more. I think would be one piece of advice. The other one would be, as I got out into the world, I grew up in Oregon. I spent my 20s in San Francisco. I spent my 30s in Seattle. So I'm a West Coast kid. And I think we had a pretty diverse set of teachers and a pretty diverse curriculum, but I would get more diversity of thought. Like I would bring in, very progressive economic theories and teach us about those, and very conservative economic theories and teach us about those. I felt like the latter was like really, as I started encountering decisions and leading political action committees and representing the company in DC, like I felt a little undereducated on understanding the kind of the two parties and what their business and economic theories were. So I would say to my professors now, hey, we should have spent more time learning some of the more, exotic forms of these policies, because I think we pretty much had one-sided view of that, and it took me many years to get up to speed so I can navigate a company through this. It wasn't so much personal. It was, how do I navigate a company when you have this president and administration or one, different political parties? And I felt like I had to learn that, painfully over the years after. So I would say get diversity of thought in how you teach the different constructs, particularly in the economics portion of my MBA.
Yeah, good point, especially as it relates to labor, because it's our biggest cost in business, right? And it's where you spend the most time, regardless. So there's so much innovation that's out there that, we can tap into or not, but the diversity of thought is super important.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll pass that information on, and it's being recorded anyway. One thing I would just say that your presence in our classrooms definitely, addresses at least some of the things that Clarice was saying, that the connection to the practical world from the theories that are being taught in the class, and of course the diversity of points of views when it comes to economics. Definitely is useful for business persons. But so I'll send invitations again in the class, and hopefully you can
Look forward to it.
Thank you for coming here too. Thank you.
Thank you, Letfis. Our next question comes from Armand Moatari. Armand, do you want to turn your video on and ask your question?
Sure, yes, hi. Thank you, Clarice, and thank you so much, Stephen, for this great conversation. I'm actually an alum of the MBA program as well, but also a staff member currently in the Graduate School of Business at SF State. And happy to actually mention that a couple of the things you were talking about, the soft skills, having some of that included in the program. We have constituted that. We have a lot of workshops for our students that cover, soft skills or learning more about who you are as a person, how you work within a team. And also one of the other things that was mentioned, Stephen mentioned about, making sure that the students are, grouped in certain categories in terms of how much work experience they've had. So that we're definitely doing with our executive program, and then our traditional program is now more, for students who are just maybe coming out of undergrad. But that wasn't my question. I was wondering with Stephen, you've had a amazing background, and of course you yourself are probably a great mentor, but I was just wondering if you've had a mentor along the way, or someone that you really admire in the business world that you'd like to share.
Yeah, there's a couple of them, and I talked about John Seely Brown, who was more of a life mentor, and very thoughtful. He was my grandfather. He is my grandfather's age, and you can Google John Seely Brown. He's quite extraordinary in what he's done over the last 50 plus years. When I was at Starbucks, and for those that are on the call that are later in their career, the opportunity to join a public company board of directors. So I was a chief information officer running IT and engineering, but I wasn't running sales and marketing and HR and all the other functions of a company. And so part of my career development was to join a public company board of directors. And I think this was in 2009, I may get the year one off, but it was around that time. Howard Schultz introduced me to a Silicon Valley coach or guy. His name was Bill Campbell, but he was, what I later found out was kind of the coach to so many executives in Silicon Valley. And Howard said, "Why don't you go down and meet Bill Campbell, who, and you can Google him. He's quite an extraordinary. He passed away a few years ago, but quite an extraordinary leader and gentleman and background." And so I flew down here and met with him. And Bill was a very different coach to me. So where at JSB was John Seely Brown was thoughtful and approached it from a kind of a psychological advantage. How do you do the things you do, and let's understand and unpack those. Campbell was opposite. He would, very direct, drop a few F-bombs. Half the problems I went in to tell him about, he's like, "They're your problems. Get out of here. Stop complaining." I mean, he was very intense. And later I found out he was, everyone in Silicon Valley you talk to that are running all these companies at some point had an intersection with this guy over the last, 30 years. And so for me, it was the extremes of a very patient, thoughtful, inwardly focused mentor who half the time you don't even know he's mentoring you, Dr. John Seely Brown. And the other time it's get the F out of my office. You're complaining. I don't want to hear your complaints. And now we're off trying to fix the problem. And both shape me. So I'm a product of both of those styles. And I think Bill was a mentor by fire and cut through all the BS that, corporate speak and dancing around tough issues and no reluctance to have a fierce conversation with you. And I think that actually later in my career really shaped me and really made me get to the point of issues rather than spend all this time and all these calories trying to beat around the bush.
Thanks so much, Stephen. And can I have a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
What is that behind you that we're seeing?
Oh, this thing? This one?
Yes.
When I started with my co-founders, Chronicle, which is the cybersecurity company within Alphabet that later moved back into Google Cloud, when we graduated and went from a project to a company, all the other companies at Alphabet at the time, the drone project, the balloon, they all gave me like a gift for graduating and becoming the next Alphabet company. And the drone delivery team is still wrapped up because I just moved offices, but they gave me one of the early prototypes of their drones as a gift.
Okay, thank
and
you.
I gave them a computer virus because we were cyber. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, Armand. Our next question comes from Sybil Yang. Sybil, do you want to hop on video and ask your question? You're on mute.
Nice to meet you. So looking back on your time in school, so after all of this experience, like both you, Clarice, and Stephen, as an entrepreneur, as executives, how would you suggest like our turbo students kind of allocate their time while they're in school? So as a teacher, like, you know, some of our highest performers, they're very stressed about the grades and the academics, but we put a lot of extracurricular activities and social opportunities, and I find that they have a tough time balancing them. I was one of those people who was willing to sacrifice the A for like a C in one class and a social event someplace else. But just from you guys' perspectives, how would you recommend allocating the time within school?
That's some of the best times in life. It's a shame to be so focused on grades that you don't get to enjoy it. I took yoga, I took sailing, I took everything that was, I didn't have to pay for that I could learn, right? In combination, I still have my cassette tape dance party, over in the dorms. I lived in a dorm that doesn't even exist anymore, but just took full advantage. I think it's such a life experience, and you're learning from more than just your classes, right? I think if people are super focused on grades, maybe they're going to want to go to grad school, but it actually, depending on your major, isn't that important. You've done most of the hard work in high school and getting into the university to begin with. So it really is trying to focus on developing the whole person, and of course, learning what you're there to learn, right, from an academic standpoint. But boy, don't miss that opportunity, because it's just some of the best times in your life typically.
Yeah, I mean, what I think Clarice said, I echo everything, and I would add that, the more professional of a student you become, your degree and your grade point may get you the interview, but like who you are is going to get you the job. And so my advice to people in school now, my kids, I have 8 of them, right? And one in college and one you just started walking. So the whole range. My advice is make sure you do things that balance you out. So you don't want to be the super academic person. You're just going to work for someone who isn't that. Go be the someone who isn't that, and excel and do your studies and let your parents put pressure on you. That's fine. But make sure you don't graduate only vertically focused or myopic on your grade point and your degree. Make sure you've done things, as Clarice said, over the 2, 4, 6+ years that balance you out and get you comfortable as a person, not as a degree, not as a school, not as an alum, just who you are. And that's actually, I think, more difficult. A great CEO once told me that in leadership, the hard skills are the ones that you learn, your mechanics, your finance, your marketing, your computer science. But the soft skills are the ones that allow you to be successful. And in the end, the soft skills are the hard ones to master, not the mechanics of your job, the softer part of the job, which is the EQ part of the equation. And when I talk to overachievers, it's great. And it's great to have a 4.04. But in the end, if you want to look back 10 years after you graduate and be proud of what you've become as a leader, as a team member, as a person, you're gonna. My advice is be in tune with the softer part of your personality and not just the mechanics of your education.
Great, thank you both so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Sybil. Our final question, because we are already over time, but hopefully we can squeeze in this last one, is from Minu Kumar, who is one of our faculty members. He can't be on to ask, but he asks, what are some internal factors that motivate you, and what are external ones?
Clarice, I'm always offering you to go first, but I'm happy to. It's courteous. It should kick my butt if I don't.
Oh, I miss you, Stephen. I would say, internally, that's something that's very personal, right? And it's to Stephen's point earlier, it's super important as a human to take time to figure that out. And in all the career advising that I've done in my life, the first thing I ask people is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, that's 10 years down the road. That's from a human standpoint and a professional standpoint. But whether you have to take yourself out to a mountaintop and sit alone and just think about it for a few hours until you can come up with it, whatever you have to do, you have to stay focused on who you are internally first, right? And I think that I don't know, for me, that's one of the things that drives me, period. And I talked about before, my personal mission is to make a difference. And I had a coach similar to what Stephen talked about at some point that Howard insisted that I have. And there's no way I was going to get done with that coaching without having a personal mission. And it's made a huge difference in my life in terms of being able to make choices, right? When things are put in front of you, because what motivates you, it's intrinsic for me, it's making a difference. But then, people put money in front of you, they put opportunities in front of you. If you have a lens that you can look through to try to look at what is important or not important about what's being put in front of you in terms of motivation, it can really help guide you as your North Star, more or less, because there's many things that can be motivating.
Again, well said, and I can't add much more to that. I think for me personally, it goes back to the humanity part of your profile, not the academic part, which is, we all have insecurities, we all have vulnerabilities, we all, aren't sure at times what decision we made or, why we aren't progressing to the degree we want to progress. And so inside, intrinsically for me, I'll end on a story. It was actually at Starbucks. It was probably 2009. So I was a year into it. And as Clarice will remember, it was a kind of a bad period. I mean, the stock was down. You had activist investors on the stock. You had every late night TV show making fun of Starbucks. You had everyone saying, if you want to save money after the 2008 crisis, cut out your coffee spend. And I think McDonald's bought the billboard out in front of our Seattle headquarters that said, $4 is dumb. Try the new McCafe. Yep. Remember that?
Yeah.
So that was it was hard. Now everyone looks back at the HBR business case and all the books written about it. But in there, you have a lot of insecurities, right? And I remember sitting at my desk and I was eating some nasty burrito that I got locally. And I think it was the New York Times or Washington, but one of those big mags had released an article. And the article was 100-year celebration, 1909 to, I think, 2009. It was 100 years of this hospice company. Hospice is, the service that takes care of people in their homes as they're about to die, basically. And this hospice is operated in the U.S. and Canada for 100 years. And what this article was an interactive website where you can read the answers to the same 10 questions they ask people for the last 100 years as they're about to die. And I'm in the middle of this crisis. I'm a new executive. I have a ton of insecurities. I have a young family. And I'm sitting there and I'm on this quick break reading this, and this thing comes up and I start clicking around 1928, 1942, 1951, 2006. And the answers are, what do you wish you did more of? What do you wish you did less of? What do you wish what advice would you give yourself? And no matter what year you clicked on for the last 100 years, the answers were the same. I mean, the English was a little funky because it goes back, but it was never, I wish I had a better career, or I wish I had a better Fidelity bank statement, or I wish I had more money. It was always the same. I wish I, buried the hatchet with a sibling who I haven't talked to in 10 years. I wish I spent more time traveling. I wish I got reconnected with my faith. I wish I had that third kid. I wish I had traveled. It was those answers. And I was like, wow, here I am in the middle of all the things, doing everything that is not on any of those answers. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, and was like, wow. So from that point on, I really tried to make sure, back to your inspiration, when you asked the question, that I'm not perfect, but I try to make sure that my life and how I show up at work and home and all the roles I play, from dad to son to brother to whatever, that I'm always directionally going to be proud of the answers I give when eventually someone asks me, what are the 10 things you wish you did in life? And so that is how I would end, in kind of a whole package of advice to make sure you do that as well. Make sure you understand what's important, understand what priorities should be. And of course, we have to live and do all these other things. But at the end of it all, are we really going to wish we're doing the things we're doing now or not?
Hey, Stephen and Clarice, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you both for spending the time with us out of your busy schedules, for joining us. We couldn't be so much proud of both of you as MBA alums or SF State alums for that matter. So thank you for your advice, for sharing your experiences, for your journey, and for being who you are. And so we are so proud of both of you on behalf of the Land Family College of Business and San Francisco State. So to everybody who joined us for this virtual event this evening, thank you so much for attending this event. We look forward to seeing you at a future event, and we wish you all well. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.